Hello, this is Malik Ayub Symbol, and you are watching Eastern Horizon. We are live on Facebook, X, and YouTube. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is in Beijing, taking a major step to elevate UK-China relation to new heights. In his first visit to UK, leaders in 8 years, Starmer met Chinese President Xi Jinping for a more sophisticated long-term strategic partnership amid global challenges. Xi Jinping emphasized that engagement with China is not a choice but a necessity. So, facing numerous economic challenge back at home, the 60 persons high-level delegation in the Prime Minister Keir Starmer delegation, the people comprised on different big companies and from different cultural side. So, to discuss this, I have joined from University of the Belfast, Dr. Peter Doran. I'm really thankful, Dr. Peter, to join and to comment on this. Thank you very much, Peter.
It's good to be with you, Malik. Thank you very much.
I apologize for a disruption in our previous live, I think, starter. So let me go to you and how you see this high-profile visitor of British Prime Minister in 8 years, and with such a high-level delegation. So how you comment and how this visit sounds back in UK?
Well, I think it's interesting to note that Keir Starmer is not the first high-profile visitor to beat a track to the door of the Chinese presidency. We've had Mark Carney from Canada when he arrived in Davos and delivered his really what could become an historic speech at Davos. He was also hot footing from Beijing. Macron, I think, has been there a couple of times. And even the Prime Minister from Ireland has been there in the past couple of weeks. Now, these are never about personalities. I think these moments, especially when there's been a hiatus, as we've had in the relationship between the UK and China over the past 8 years, whenever there's a new moment, a new outreach to refresh and reset the relationship, and to put it on a more even keel for more continuity and predictability, these are normally signs of the times in terms of geopolitical uh, shifts. And at the moment, I would say all of these visits, the convergence of views among the Western elites, that China is the new center of gravity, that you cannot ignore China, and to
Mhm.
do so, you do so at your peril, whether it's in terms of geopolitics, but for the most part, in terms of new economic opportunities. So I think this is a sign of the times. In the background, of course, is the disruption and the unpredictability of the US presidency. But to the foreground is in terms of the UK, there's also an attempt by the Labour administration under Keir Starmer to begin to recover the UK's position after the unprecedented folly of constructing trade barriers between itself and its European trading partners. That has damaged the UK economy, and there is now a lot of ground to make up. And the resetting of relationships with China, the desire to take a more pragmatic, less ideological, entrenched view of the threat that China poses because of the perception in America and in parts of the UK establishment that by being such an influential player, such a powerful economic, technological, and geopolitical player, per se, is read or interpreted by certain, I would say, reactionary figures in the Washington administration and in parts of the UK administration. That is deemed a threat in itself.
Mm.
I don't think that is necessarily an accurate reading. I think there's every opportunity for this pragmatic variegated approach where, yes, you work on those areas of difference, and there are deep differences geopolitically, but
Mm,
that you can make it much easier to deal with those differences if you're also constructing healthy economic, business, commercial, financial relationships. And they're significant. They've been significant for some time. Um, China, when you factor in Hong Kong, is a major trading partner for the UK, but there's a bit of a deficit in the trading of goods, for example. So the UK has some ground to make up in terms of exports.
mm. So, British Prime Minister mentioned in his talk with media that the unemployment and especially the jobs creation, and he also talked about the tariffs on the British whiskies. They also talk about the visa-free regime for the British tourist to China. So, I mean that how you think that the British economy that is quite struggling right now, how they could benefit under this Chinese win-win situation, because this multilateralism and this multipolarity has one of the major feature that is based on the win-win principle. So how you see this?
That's right. As Carney in particular set out, I think the middle ranking powers are coming to terms with what is essentially a new world order. There will be a much more varied series of relationships, trading relationships, and I suppose new tiers of multilateral cooperation platforms. And within that context, countries like the UK will have to come to terms with the need to protect their economy while pursuing their existing security and geopolitical interests. That is up in the air, it has to be said, in terms of the UK. The UK has long treasured its special relationship. Um, Belgium maybe named the nature of that relationship more honestly in the past week when they talked about vassalage. Um, but nevertheless, let's think about the economic wins here. As I've said, there's a healthy balance in terms of financial services, professional services, but a lot of ground to make up in terms of trade. I think it's about two-thirds to a third in favor of China at the moment in terms of the balance of trade. Another
Mm,
big both strategic and commercial opportunity. These things are never easy to separate out. Is energy, for example. So one of the partners on the trade mission that has been led by Keir Starmer, in effect, and will convene in Shanghai, is Octopus. Octopus are an interesting, quite innovative leading energy company, and their chief executives have talked in no uncertain terms about the need for the UK to address its energy costs, especially the costs of deploying energy infrastructure in the renewable sector. Now, they've said that if Starmer can help secure a deal in terms of the deployment of Chinese technology, that it could actually cut up to a third of the costs of deployment. I think there are some plans, for example, for deployment of new wind farms in Scotland, for example. And in the wake of, again, the self harm that the Europeans and the UK have inflicted on themselves in the wake of their relationship or the dismantling of the relationship with Russia over the Ukraine conflict, then
mm,
there's a real need to address the inflationary and inflated costs
mm, mm,
of delivering energy to the population in the UK. Just to take one
mm.
example.
So I would go to another aspect because we saw that after this Greenland and Donald Trump continuous tariff war, especially towards this alliance, European Union. UK, and Canada. The Finland Prime Minister used a term, he coined a term about this value based realism. And Canadian Prime Minister also mean that to elaborate and to further highlight this aspect. So, how you see that this the stone that Donald Trump has pelted into and in this international politics and international arena. So
Yeah.
where it's heading towards, because we saw that mean that a lot of Western countries are heading towards China and realignment in terms of its economic, strategic, and other many aspects. So, so where you see that mean that what the U.S. is the U.S. hegemony on stake, or what exactly U.S. want to push these countries towards which side?
Okay. Yeah. Well, as I alluded to in the opening, I think the backdrop to all of these, or this flurry of activity, and this pragmatic opening to new relationships and renewed relationships with China, that the backdrop to that is the deep uncertainty that has been caused by the erratic uh, behavior, both in terms of geopolitics, violent interventions, a number of conflicts that have been triggered by the US administration, uh, never mind Nobel Peace Prizes, the claim on Greenland. And by the way, the news around Greenland was a very quick withdrawal of Trump's threat of new tariffs on the Europeans. There's two sides to this. I've often said that the most dangerous and unpredictable and threatening moment in the life of an empire is when that empire is in decline. And I would say that Trump and his administration are, above all, a symptom of a decline, uh, a failure to come to terms with the multipolar world that was always going to emerge at the end of the Cold War. That unipolar moment was just that, it was a moment. And the US, they've elected Trump as part of a systemic denial of the need to come to terms with all of that.
Mm,
Now, Carney is recognizing and naming that dynamic. He's talking about a very similar concept to the one that you've described from Finland, a new order which is much more variegated, much more pluralist, um, and much more pragmatic. Comes to terms with the new center of gravity in China, but also coming to terms with the rise of the BRICS countries in particular, who, in many ways, they are the headline, if you like, the headline act in this new multipolar world. And what's interesting, as I've said, Trump very quickly withdrew the new threats of tariffs over Greenland after the talks with the NATO Secretary General. But I would say that there's another sign or straw in the wind here, which speaks to the decline, the real decline of U.S. Influence, and that is the tremendous damage that Trump has begun to do to the status of the dollar. We all know that it's a reserve currency. It has a privileged status, and it's that status that has underlined or underwritten the imperial influence of the U.S. in I suppose the world order that emerged after the Second World War. But we can see that the recent actions that Trump has taken have led to a fall in the dollar. We know that a number of the BRICS countries have begun to systematically circumvent, if you like, their reliance on the dollar for trading. And
mm,
is maybe most revealing and shocking in Davos was the preparedness of a senior U.S. government official to go on the record unapologetically, almost in a celebratory, boastful mood, talking about the manipulation that the U.S. exercised because of its its privileged status and the privileged status of the dollar, its ability to manipulate the Iranian economy and to take the Iranian population hostage. This is what happens. It has happened for
mm,
generations
mm,
over structural adjustment policies and what have you. But
mm,
populations are taken hostage
mm,
until uh, the damage is done to the regime. That's the threat, and that was behind the attempt to trigger unrest and to destabilize the Iranian regime. And we've yet to see how that will play out. But all
mm,
of this, now that it's up in lights, now that it is the declared policy, and as Carney, by the way, noted, there has always been a deep hypocrisy at the end, at the heart of the so-called liberal rules-based order. These manipulations, these sources of structural violence, abusing the power over weaker economies or vulnerable economies, all of that is now up for well revisiting, and the
mm,
U.S. will suffer the consequences. Their decline will be rapid, not only in
mm,
terms of their geopolitical influence, but in terms of the damage to the domestic economy.
mm,
Once the dollar begins to lose that privileged status, and many
mm,
countries, we know, many countries are working to deprive the U.S. of that influence. They're not going to put themselves in Iran's position or the position of many other countries who've been vulnerable and abused by that imperial dollar in the past.
mm, mm. So let's come to the British Prime Minister to China. So how you see, I mean, that the potential between both the countries, and especially in terms of mean that to boost their economies, because the UK Prime Minister also mentioned that there is cooperation into the AI and the climate environment cooperation. They could be very much aligned on this, and in terms of the AI, UK can get more. Mean that the benefits from the Chinese expertise. So how you see this?
That's right. In the 8 years that the UK really retreated from a proactive and constructive relationship with China, the decline really was on the back of the unrest in Hong Kong. But in that 8 or 10 years, China has asserted itself as a world leader in terms of technology, AI, quantum computing. And there, of course, there's a security concern from the UK's perspective because these new technologies are also giving China a significant lead in terms of the weaponry. You know, the integration of AI into new weapon systems as well. So there's an ambivalent side there in terms of security concerns as well. But you're right, the UK wants to access those technologies, and I was fascinated, having sat through so many years of UN conversations where the talk about technology transfer, you know, per se, it came to be the transfer from the West, you know, from the former technological leaders to Africa or South America or Asia. And now we're hearing calls for technology sharing and transfer from China to the UK to enable it to catch up and stay ahead of the curve in terms of the application of these new technologies. And the other point you've made, which is absolutely right, the UK was the first country, I think it was one of the first, certainly, to adopt a national climate change law. Many countries have done that, but they provided the template. And they would like to see themselves, certainly the Europeans, but the UK as well, they'd like to see themselves as leaders in terms of the response to climate change. And, the most profound and fundamental dimension of that response is not just environmental regulation or even adaptation, it's the adjustments to the economy, you know, making systemic changes to the economy. And aligning those changes to export markets and technological innovation. And China, of course, is the exemplar with its long-standing commitment to ecological civilization, that rich, very rich version of what we call the green economy. It's much more than technology, and it's much more than commerce. It's about
Hmm,
rethinking the way we organize society, and it's a values-based challenge as well. And I think you're quite right. There are people like Miliband in the UK government sitting alongside Starmer who are just itching really to have a very positive, constructive relationship around the leadership role on climate. And it must be said, that in contrast countries like the US, who have doubled down on their production of old uh, engine types, they will find themselves stranded. Their industry is going to find itself stranded if they don't adopt the new EV technologies that are already penetrating the UK and European markets from China.
hmm. So, British Prime Minister also said that along his 60-member delegation, a big number of the top businessmen, but a big number is also among the people from the cultural background. So, how you think that this China UK culture binding, because culture is one of the major tool of the diplomacy, and China has a very strong culture, and so how you think that the perspective and this cultural cooperation, how it could be extend between the UK and China?
Yes, there's well two related dimensions to that. One of the most successful sectors of the economy in the UK, of course, is cultural production. Think about music and filmmaking and all of I suppose, the advertising and promotion that goes with that. It's a major global industry in which the UK has always had a bit of a lead. Um, and of course, in the context of the meetings taking place over the next few days, we all know that power is exercised in many ways, and we have this concept of soft power, where the cultural exchange, the mutual understanding, and the curiosity that our respective countries have about each other's cultures is given expression. And this feeds into the kinds of understanding, I suppose, the cultivation of empathy and insight, especially in the context of a much more plural world where we all have to step out of our own national bubbles. A country like the UK, England, it's famous for its its population tends to be uh, uh, limited in terms of its languages. It can be a little bit introverted. Because of the history of the UK, the tendency has been to champion its own presence in the world and to see others in relation to its own priorities. So the cultural exchanges, the co-productions in film, the growing interest in the music sector, and providing access for cultural actors and artists from China. This will also be part of the new alignment. A much more pluriversal world is emerging and even might take hold in the British imagination as well.
Hmm, hmm. Thank you very much, Peter Doran. I really appreciate your deep insight on this historic visit between China and United Kingdom. Thank you so much for joining Eastern Horizon.
Thank you, Malik. Thanks.
You should